May I now turn to you, Mr. Patel. Same question, maybe a slightly different answer from where you sit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, USG Usha. Let me first start by thanking Ambassador Kamboj for hosting this important event. Ambassador Nasir, USG Gill, Professor, Excellencies. I would say we should step back and just take a look at the world and why this is so important. So we've never had a richer world in terms of finance than at this stage. There's nearly half, I think it's $500 trillion of wealth, liquid wealth in the world. And $100 trillion of GDP have been achieved. So we've never been richer. And yet, as we've heard from my esteemed colleagues on the panel, the statistics are that a quarter of the world, just over a quarter, does not have a bank account. And that number rises to 2/3 of the world's adults may have a bank account but are not users of financial product. And 3/4 of the world have never borrowed or saved formally into the financial system. So the world's financial system is created for the few, for the very few, as an active system. And that system created, still on the positive side, from these few, $500 billion. So I would step back and say that our challenge is all ahead of us. And it's fantastic and very powerful that India has created a piece of technology that can help the world at the intersection of financial inclusion and of social good. And so this is, I think, the power of the story that we're hearing. I would go a step further and say that if we look at the panel and this story and the host, it's India. And you have to almost do a double take if you have not been to India recently, because you would expect this panel and all the flags in the corner to be Chinese. But they're not. You know, India as a democracy has often been thought of as a country that could not execute something so well. But it has. And in your visits to India, if you do them, you will see how much this has changed and how difficult it might be to execute this technology across a country as big as India, as diverse as India, and as poor as India. What it has done in terms of the impact is that the Indian economy, which took nearly 50 years to get to the first $1 trillion GDP, in approximately a dozen years, got to 2 trillion, and then took about 6 or 7 years to get to 3 trillion. And that is such a steep curve. It's expected, widely expected now by economists, that India's economy will double in the next 3 years, triple by 2030, and is on a trajectory to be one of the top 3 economies by 2050. So what a shift. And that shift cannot be achieved without the underpinnings of a financial system that is robust, completely inclusive. And I very much like what USG Gill just said. I think 3 things come out of it. One of them is dignity. That how could you possibly have a system designed for the few to participate in a world this interconnected now? So that's part one, that it is the dignity. The second is that it encourages huge innovation. So what we've seen is that everybody has seen this system as a way to streamline the whole payment process, to drive financial inclusion, to reach people through their mobile phones, so peer-to-peer payments happen. And this is far more advanced than we see in many, many parts of the world, including the West. The third part, I think, is that if you have a platform like that, almost everything becomes a little bit easier. So Social Security payments go straight through this system. When you roll out vaccines for the pandemic, it goes straight through this system because you know where your citizens are and you can invite them to participate. So it is a platform for mass financial inclusion. If you represent a country in the audience, I would say to you that it's an exciting time because it's been done in India, and if one person can do it, everyone can. And having come from Delhi and spent some time with the ministers who are looking at this, I think the most exciting message is that as the president of the G20, India is thinking now that it's time to spread this to the world and offer this technology to the world. So what a powerful story. You will not necessarily have to invent it from scratch. You should be able to take India's technology, adapt it to your culture, your society, your financial system, and your other technologies, and do something that suits your country, which was made in another country. And if we're to solve the SDGs, I think it will be about this collaboration for all our sakes. So human security and the SDGs for all can happen because of innovations like this in one country. And so it's very important, I think, innovation. And to finally come back to the comparison of the elephant, India, moving slowly, and the fierce, fast-moving dragon that was China, I think the elephant has turned into a tiger. And it is here to actually share something with the rest of the world. And so I'm delighted to be part of that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patel. Absolutely. You know, your numbers on the finance and trillions out there was startling but true. And I do believe that financial inclusion allows us to include. It's not about serving the richest and leaving it there. Now, we have 10 minutes, I think, left of our session here, and I was going to ask difficult questions of my three panelists, but I think we don't have time to do that. So what I'd like to do now is turn to the audience to see if you have any questions, observations, and I'd actually like to start with someone, a gentleman I met this morning, Mr. Gary Shapiro, who's the president and CEO of the Consumer Technology Association here in the US. Mr. Shapiro, may I ask you to make a few remarks, and then I'd like to throw it open for any other questions. And if there are no questions, I will ask my difficult questions. So there you go. Over to you, Mr. Shapiro.
Thank you, Undersecretary Manari and Ambassador and Professor. Wow, what a session. It is impressive. So I'm Gary Shapiro. I head the Consumer Technology Association, which is a non-governmental organization in the United States that represents some 1,500 technology companies. And we have a very simple mission, and it's focused on innovation. Some of you may know us because we produce the CES, which is the world's largest innovation and technology event. It's every January in Las Vegas. And we get about well over 100,000 people from around the world, including about 5,000 media. And there you can see actual innovation being introduced. 3,200 companies exhibit. They have stands. And it attracts political types, people focused on the environment. This last edition was especially good. Not only did we come back from COVID, but we also partnered up with the UN-affiliated body, the World Academy of Arts and Sciences. And consistent with the UN sustainability goals, we focused on the Academy's and the UN's human securities, the basic human rights that every citizen of the world should have. The right to clean air, the right to clean water, the right to food, the right to health care, the right to community involvement, and a few others. And what we saw there was businesses in America and elsewhere in the world stepping up and showing how their technologies can help solve these fundamental human problems. What's so delightful to hear today is to see how India, with this incredible STEP program, using a platform, a unique platform in the mobile telephone, has not only transformed India, but has the ability to change the world in a way which allows financial inclusion. Indeed, to me, this program is India's financial inclusion miracle, and I congratulate everyone engaged in it. But that is the kind of thing that makes a difference, and as one of the panelists said, this is because the platform combined with the mobile telephone is what has allowed this to occur. Now, the mobile telephone or smartphone, in its only fewer than 45-year existence, has changed the world in many different ways. It's become so ubiquitous that the sensors in the phone, and there are multiples of them, and being produced at the billion unit level, have come down to pennies per sensor. And that has allowed an explosion in technology, which has allowed the democratization and the raising of the world so that more and more people have access to things which the wealthiest people in the world couldn't even get just 40 years ago or even 20 years ago. Those sensors are being combined in very unique ways by innovators and entrepreneurs all over the world. At CES, over 1 out of every 3 people come from outside the United States to the United States because they have innovation. Indeed, the most popular area of the show is Eureka Park. That is aimed and only for startups. And startups, delegations coming from around the world, and they show what they have. This is a global effort focusing on making the world better and giving our children and grandchildren a better world and allowing everyone to raise. So to hear about this today, I thank you for sharing it. It's been an honor working with Ketan Patel, who introduced me, and others that are here today. And I think this is a great example of how one country can make a difference, not only for its own citizens, but for the entire world.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. And I'd like now to call upon